See, Trump knew it was all campaign bullshit.
He did.
They had no intention of cutting anything, but they want to talk about it. It's good politics, and nobody is against that.
And a lot of the people in the government have never held, a large percentage of them have never held a real job in their life, or for a very short time did. And then they just went into career politicians.
Yeah, I mean, there's these guys that are in government for their entire life.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these guys, they don't. The only way you get them out of office is they die.
Right.
Of old age.
Yeah.
Right.
We just had Mitch McConnell in the studio. He's still kicking.
Yeah, they're in there. Who's the just died? It was big senator just died.
Lindsey Graham.
Lindsey Graham, right? But I mean, how long was he there? Right? They're there forever.
Yeah.
And
his sister's there now.
And now
too.
His sister, it's like a hereditary title.
That's right. It's monarchy.
Yeah, I mean, I
don't have that in Puerto Rico, right?
But it probably is even worse. There's a lot of nepotism going on down there. There's a lot of corruption in Puerto Rico. Don't get me started on that. But governments are always going to be corrupt. That's another reason that we need to limit their size. They've got to be small, because they're like when Elon Musk, when Trump was originally elected, a big part of the campaign was, we're going to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah,
right? The DOGE was going to come in, and
were you a DOGE guy?
I mean, I want to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, but I know that that's impossible, because that's government. If you're going to have government, you're going to have waste, fraud, and abuse. That's just par for the course. But I was telling my clients and my audience for my podcast that this was all BS. None of it's going to happen. Nothing's going to get cut, because I heard the same thing when Reagan was first elected. It was the same campaign. Let's get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. They had something called the Grace Commission that they studied the government. They made all kinds of recommendations.
The Grace Commission?
Yeah, Peter Grace. They made all kinds of recommendations on how to cut government spending. None of them were implemented.
None of them.
Because everybody wanted to have the commission to study it, but nobody wanted to implement the recommendations, because there is a constituency. Nothing is in the federal budget by accident, right? So every dime of waste and fraud is benefiting somebody, and they don't want to take it away, just like they don't want to take away a Social Security benefit. And that's why they ran Elon Musk out of town, because he came in there actually thinking that this was real, that he was actually supposed to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. See, Trump knew it was all campaign bullshit.
He did.
They had no intention of cutting anything. But they want to talk about it. It's good politics, and nobody is against that. Who's going to say, I'm in favor of fraud? I'm in favor of waste and abuse. Of course, no one's.
I could find you a few people,
but so everybody is willing to cut until it comes right down to having to vote for it, and then you get some special interest group that comes into your office and says, you vote to get rid of this. We're not giving you any more money, or we're gonna fund your opponent in the next primary. So nobody cuts anything. That's why the debt is almost $40 trillion. We can't get rid of anything. There are government programs that were started 50, 100 years ago that are still around.
That's right.
But why are they there? The income tax, the payroll tax started as part of the victory tax to win the Second World War. Nobody had income taxes deducted from their pay until 1942.
Wow.
Well, we won that war. Why do we still have the tax? The war was over in 1945. That's why, we actually lost every war we fought, because every time we have a war, the government gains some new powers. And it never surrenders the powers when the wars are over. But it gets these new powers and these new taxes because they say we need this to win this war.
Yeah. Tupac once said they got money for wars but can't feed the poor.
Well, the capitalism would feed the poor. We don't need the government. We don't need the government. In fact, if you look at the history of government, government policy with respect to food is designed to make food more expensive. The entire basis of our agricultural program, and it started in the 1930s, is to make food more expensive so the farmers can make more money. That is the entire purpose of the agriculture department. They pay farmers not to grow food, to take land
Not to
out of
grow
production.
food.
Yes, to take land out of production.
Wait, what?
Yes, that's why those programs are there, to make prices higher.
Can you give an example of that?
That's the whole program. Look, in fact, it started during the Depression. They were saying that food was too cheap, right? We needed
In
to
the
make
Depression.
Yes, and you're saying, wait a minute. So it's a depression. You're complaining that food is cheap. Isn't that a good thing? I mean, times are tough. Isn't cheap food like a good thing? But no, because they want to get the votes of the farmers, right? So the farmers want high prices. They want to sell their food for more.
This is what you're talking about right here. So the 1933 Agricultural Adjustment Act passed during the Great Depression. It paid farmers to leave land unplanted and destroy surplus crops to reduce supply and drive up plunging food prices.
Yeah, look, and you look at the government warehouses. They buy up cheese. They buy up all kinds of stuff to make the price go up. Look, the free market feeds the poor. It makes food more plentiful and more affordable. And when the point I was going to make earlier about the poor, the government creates poverty and perpetuates poverty because it serves their interests, right? You set up a government program to deal with poverty, and now that government agency wants more poverty because now they're a bigger part of the government. They have a bigger budget, right? So, but private charity wants to end poverty. And
a lot of fraud in that, though.
No, not nearly as much, because private charity relies on donations.
And then they create jobs that they don't need. They pay administrative fees.
But when you donate to charity, one of the most important things that you look at is, okay, you got a charity. How much of my money goes to the cause versus how much is used in administration? And in a typical charity, if you give $1 to the charity, maybe 10 to 20 cents goes to administer the charity, and 80 to 90 cents goes to the intended beneficiaries.
It feels like a lot of charities have flipped that paradigm, though.
But the government, it's the opposite. The government takes $1 in taxes and keeps 80 to 90 cents for itself. The poor people get a small fraction.
I agree with you on the government part. I just think it's a lot more similar on the private charity part.
But it's hard to do that. Yes, I'm not saying that there aren't any fraudulent charities, but there is a check on that. Government is funded by taxation, which is a mandatory extraction. So the government is taking my money away from me. I got no say in the matter.
Right.
But a private charity has to convince me to make a donation. And so if I'm going to write a big check to a charity, I'm not going to do that unless I'm convinced that it's not a scam, that they're not just using the charity as an excuse to enrich themselves. And they're not. So there is some free market forces that are going to check on. And to the extent that you have a more vibrant, productive economy, which you will have with less government, you're going to have a lot more money available for charitable causes.
Sure.
And so I think there's going to be a lot more charitable giving if we don't nationalize that function to the government. Because anything that you have the government do, it's going to do badly. Okay. It's going to be expensive and it's going to be inefficient. That's why the government should do as little as possible. That's why I don't like the government even involved in education. I think education is important. We shouldn't allow the government to do it.
The education system has definitely got a lot of problems.
Well, look, everything. If you look at the things that the government is involved in the most, education, healthcare, and housing, those are the most overpriced things that we got. Right? Because we don't have the free market involved the way we do in other things. There's no clothing crisis. Right? Clothes are not unaffordable because the government doesn't make our clothes. The free market provides us with clothes. Same thing with food. Right? It's getting more expensive due to inflation. And yes, government programs jack up the price. But by and large, the supermarkets are full of affordable food. Right.
I get the same shit every single time. I swear to God, the bills that I was getting like $180 for 2 years ago are like $330 now.
Yeah, but compare that to the cost of education, cost of college.
Well, it's insane.
Right, and that's because of the government. The only reason
Because of the government?
Of course, the government did that. Look.
Thank you guys for watching the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. They're both a huge, huge help. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below.